Friends.
All right, a couple other notes in sports, 254-339-1122. We mentioned the all Big 12 football team, but we haven't, I'm not going to go over every single player. We mentioned the superlatives, but quarterback Spencer Rattler, Oklahoma, if you're Brock Purdy, you go, hey.
Yeah, I mean, just like what T-Rex was talking about, I'm sure Brock Purdy and Matt Campbell will use that as some sort of motivation.
Running backs Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson, Iowa State and Texas. Which running back? Kennedy Brooks missed last year. He opted out. He would have, I thought, last year been someone in the Heisman Trophy race, but that's fair. And again, we don't know what kind of shape or what Kennedy Brooks is going to get, how many carries, although he's a bad dude.
And a year off.
And Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson obviously is very talented and came on at the end of last year, but bottom line, Breece Hall's the only true bell cow running back that we know of.
Well, Bijan Robinson will be now because Herman's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, because he, sees Sarkisian, believes the position exists.
If Bijan Robinson played for K-State, he would not be first team all Big 12.
No, I agree with that too. He's a dynamic, unbelievable player, but he's also got the logo.
And I voted for him, and I totally get it. But I'm just saying that a lot of that stuff that we're hearing too is very logo related.
He's one of two players from Texas on the list. Baylor had two. The other, Deshaun Jameson, the defensive back, is on the list as well. Wide receivers, Xavier Hutchinson, Iowa State. Marvin Mims, Oklahoma. And now with what's his name leaving, at Oklahoma's down at Miami or whatever, and these more catches for him.
No, Rambo's at Miami now.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah,
that's what
he's at Miami. He's been at Miami, yeah.
Zook Onama, or whatever his name is, from Texas Tech is the other wide receiver. Maybe I should remember him.
Those were my three. I mean, there's not a lot to remember from Tech, but I definitely remember him. He was one of their better players. And Mims was fantastic. I mean, he could be sensational this year.
He's just a sophomore. He
could be ridiculous. He was a touchdown machine last year. And then Hutchinson, I mean, that's a lot of that's just his career and his stats and what he did last year.
Big, tall receiver, too.
I actually think there's kind of a weak crop of wide receivers, honestly. I think Mims is clearly a dude. And Hutchinson's good and Easy's good for Tech. But, there's not three stud wide receivers at the top that just jump out like the old days of the Big 12 when you're like, hey, there's at least three Baylor guys to choose from.
Who's the best wide receiver at Texas? I mean, that's the thing. It's
Josh Moore, who catches one ball every 4 weeks for a touchdown. That's pretty much your options. There's not a lot of great options.
If you had to go 4 wide receivers, would R.J. Snead be in the discussion?
I mean, he'd be in the discussion, I guess, by default because, again, I think it's a really weak crop of wide receivers. There's no Des Bryant. There's no – I mean, Mims is the star, in my opinion. But, yeah, I mean – but what did RJ really do? Dude had barely over 500 yards receiving last year. So – I mean, if you think the offense is going to be better, I think his numbers will jump. But I also think that Tyquan Thornton could see way more of a jump, or that potentially a younger receiver could be the leading receiver. I don't think it's automatically RJ.
All right, Kohler, that to me was a given.
I wonder if anyone voted for any other tight end on the first team than Charlie Kohler.
If you did, you're insane.
Well, yeah. Who are you?
And they didn't because he was unanimous, and I think he was one of the only unanimous picks. He did skip over the fullback spot, which I'm glad that I learned there was a fullback in the Big 12.
It's always going to be Oklahoma, too.
Yeah,
isn't it?
It's the dumbest thing on the first team that they do. What are we in the 1980s still? Who uses a fullback hardly? One team out of 10?
And I was.
But they do use it, and they use it well. They always seem to have a guy that will catch 3 or 4 passes in big moments.
What do you see more valuable around the Big 12? The 1 or 2 fullbacks in the entire league of 10 teams, or the 20 gadget guys that you can put in that spot and actually have a fun slot to argue over?
Yeah,
That's just my opinion.
Iowa State with Downing and Newell on the offensive line, Oklahoma Hayes, and then the transfer Wanya Morris on there, and Josh Sills from Oklahoma State. Dawson Deaton Tech. There's 6 offensive linemen, 5 of them
Boo. Play. No ties on these all-conference teams. And there was a voting tie apparently, but there's not 6 offensive linemen on the field at a time. There's not. There's not 7 defensive backs unless you're doing a crazy deep. But I just hate that because there should be 11 and 11. That's what football is. It's 11 versus 11. Now, if it's 13 because you've added an H-back spot or something like that for these different offenses, I get that. But when it's just straight up fullback, quarterback, running back, and you have 13 guys, I hate that.
Then it should be quarterback, H-back, one running back, because most of them do, 5 offensive linemen, and there you go, right?
Yep.
And I think you get to 11. Also, I'm going to go over the special teams in a moment, but defensive line, Winfrey and Thomas from Oklahoma, Mathis from TCU, and Stills, this is Dante, that his older brother, which is the one that dominated Baylor, and then also Will McDonald at Iowa State. Bernard, Rose, and Bonito, the linebackers. That makes sense. Bernard, of course, coming off the injury.
That was the easiest group to pick,
I agree.
the returning. And there you go. 5 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, 5 defensive backs. The 13-man defense is what they got going on in the Big 12 all first
Trevius
team.
Hodges Tomlinson from Midway, TCU. He's one of the defensive backs. Jameson, Texas. Petrie, Baylor. Greg Eisworth from Iowa State, hell of a player last year, and also Harvey Peel from Oklahoma State. Those are the 5 defensive backs. Texas Tech punter is Austin McNamara. Gabe Burchick is the kicker from Oklahoma, who was fantastic.
I actually had a debate with myself on that one.
With the kicker?
Yeah, with him or Michael Dicker, because Michael Dicker's a hell of a kicker, man. Yeah. And he didn't have as good of a year last year, but he's usually automatic. And I actually debated that one a little bit. Because
Burchick was All-American, wasn't he?
Yeah, but this is, but he had like stats that were shades better than Dicker. But for my money, I'll line up either one and be perfectly fine hitting a game-winning kick. So, I actually looked at it like who could potentially be the better player this year. That's what I was trying to predict, and not so much like the default answer from last year. But Burkic, he makes total sense.
But, also I'd like to point out that most every year the kicker is going to be from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
In the Big 12. You
Extra
go back
points
to
and all that,
Austin Seibert and all that, the kicker's going to be there because Bob Stoops and now Lincoln Riley invest in that. And there are still coaches around the country that kind of treat kicking as an afterthought. And, if you look, I guarantee you, if I went back to all the national champions of the last 30 years, 20 or more of them had one of the best 2 or 3 kickers in the country.
In the country?
In the country.
Yeah.
I promise you that.
I would take that. I don't think there's anybody who had a totally bad kicker that ever made a national championship game, because I just don't see how you possibly could, unless you just did like a, who was it, like Jeff Hume was like didn't kick a field goal until like game 9 of the season. That unless you did it that way, you were just so good you never had to kick field goals. But yeah, if you did, regularly, then, and you were one of the better teams in the country, then I bet your kicker was pretty stinking good, most likely.
To me, a special teams, and Paul, you mentioned the Midway thing. If I'm a high school team and I'm up 47-3 in the third quarter, and I know you could score quickly or whatever, I want field goals attempted. Even if you miss them, I want them attempted at some point. I just think that you can never underestimate that, and obviously in college football as well.
How many games would Baylor have won with better field goal kicking over the last 5 years?
Well, and they won 2 or 3 the year they went to the Sugar Bowl because of the kicking, even though it was sporadic at times.
And if it had been more like it usually was, then they don't go to the Sugar Bowl. They're not playing for a Big 12 championship. So that alone lifted them to a Big 12 title appearance. Just the kicking lifted them to a Big 12 title, or in part led them to a Big 12 title appearance and a Sugar Bowl appearance. Kicking matters, and it ticks me off when I see people that don't take it seriously.
Drives me nuts.
Trot out a guy who can't be consistent from 32 yards. That's bad coaching. That's what that is.
It's a huge deal, man, and it's kind of like a relief pitcher in baseball. If you don't have a good one, you're going to lose games you never